Hello, everybody, and welcome to Gary and Maten's chat on money and also what could be coming up in the future um, with other things. I'm Gary from Alternative Interactions, and next to me is Maten from Plutonic Planes. Now, we have to get this bit over with first. Everything we're going to talk about is not financial information, and we are talking make believe, fantasy, and none of which we talk about will be real. And this is for entertainment purposes only. And on my channel, there is the disclaimer if you'd like to see it. So I hate to do that, guys, but we have to say these things these days because we know that some of the things we're going to be talking about may breach um, those kind of things. So anyway, buddy, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. How about yourself?
Good, thank you. Very good. Yeah, very good.
All right, so I'm going to go over the summary for all of us, what me and Gary are going to talk about today. And we'll do some charts too, but we're going to go into next month, July. We're going to talk about Gary's been looking at his pendulum. I've been looking at the charts. We're going to go into compare and share what we've been seeing and how that might look for July. And then as we progress into August, there's going to be a retrograde until mid-August, and then we have the September eclipses. And then me and Gary are going to look at October, November.
Yeah,
And the reason we're looking at these two particular months is for the following reasons. In July, in terms of financial astrology, it's a very significant marker in the 18-year financial cycle. And this is according to Ray Merriman's work. He's a financial astrologer that I follow and study. This guy here who did this for 2025. You could see a very interesting image here of him
can you just
having
hold
a
up a bit
huge,
higher, buddy? That's it. Perfect.
and you see an image
Yeah,
of him looking into a reflection, right?
yeah,
So it's or she, human looking into, and what is she seeing, right? Her mirror reflection, or is she looking at what, the Socratic kind of entities we're dealing with, the AI, what is that? And how are we dealing with that? And this year. And so we're going to look at July, and Gary's been looking at some stuff in relation to July as well. And I got some charts. And then we're going to skip over, as I was saying, to November because historically all the financial disasters have occurred around this time.
yeah,
Gary and I were talking about this months back and planning to do this video because of the history of, the 1929 market crash, the 2000 dot-com bubble, the 2008 stock housing market
yeah,
collapse, just all these periods of time where financial instability kind of blew up, or stability blew up, and it was all around October, November. So Gary and I are looking at this, and we're going to share our insights, what we found with you. And then we'll also suggest and offer some solutions because even though we're talking about finances and how we ourselves survive, because Pluto's in Aquarius and because the outer planets are all like connecting with each other to create this major change that we've been talking about, that we've all been talking about, it's an internal change as well. Because it's not just how we take care of ourselves with external currency, but how we take care of ourselves with the currency of our networks, our connections, our loved ones, those we care for, and even in the sense of whether communities will work or not work because of the 2027 shift over to the cross of the sleeping phoenix, and what that means for the individuality, and what that means for the ending of tribal relations among humans, and how the supporting frequency of what it is to be human is going to be changing
yeah,
and what that may look like in a couple years. The perfection of all these aspects happening, I want to add before we start, is not till spring of 2026. So despite our prediction or our forecasting today, none of this is going to be really that clear until next year. So we're kind of giving you guys some light bulbs through the chaos, through the dark, because we're really going to be in the dark all year. Even though certain things are going to be happening and seeming to be real, we're living with the Neptune Saturn on the Aries ingress. We still don't know what's real and what's not. And it's actually being pushed for us to be able to dismiss anything we don't like to being a product of AI. So our perceptions are being modified and shifted by our own algorithms, our prison of our own algorithms, in the sense that our whole belief system is being reconstructed in such a way that it's like backwards. And so we need perceptual clarity to know that we're only going to know things through the heart, through our intuition, through our gut, through our own sensibilities, not through the eyes. They own our eyes,
Yeah.
but they don't own the inner eye. And that's where we're going to take it today.
Yeah.
Gary, start us off. Let's go. Let's talk about, I guess, what we've been talking about. Give us maybe, let's share some background
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
financial, what's been going on in the
Yeah.
world stage with
Yeah.
BRICS in Europe and with the US dollar, and
Yeah.
let's get into that.
Yeah. 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 So, as you know, guys, I always like to look at the kind of history of how we've got here. But this is going to be relatively recent kind of histories we're talking about, and things that have been going on for some time. Some of the stuff I talk to you about will be easy to find. Some of it not quite so easy to find because some of the stuff, particularly with the BRICS information, the mainstream press are not covering, and there's a reason for that. So, something that came across my radar a couple of days ago was that China, during the month of April, um, sold back to America just about 8.75 billion pounds worth of debt bonds and treasuries. Now, that's a lot of money to us, but it's not in the world scheme of things as such. But when you understand that about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, China held over 3 trillion in American debt and treasuries, they're now holding around 760, 750 probably billions worth of treasuries. And so this has been a kind of a scam. And I was talking to Maten about this, the scam of it. China has been producing goods and exporting them to America. And America has been paying them fundamentally or tricking them into purchasing from the profits and the money they've made into buying the American debt. But the American debt is fundamentally worthless these days. And we're seeing this within the debt bond sales, where they've been the worst that they've been in many, many years. And actually, the Federal Reserve had to step in and purchase some of the American debt. And we've seen the interest rates on this American debt go from 0% from 10 years ago or so to nearly 5% currently. And what that means is that they can only get around 85 to 90% of the value of the debt because of the interest rate they have to pay. So they literally have to produce more debt bonds to cover the debt because of the interest rate, if that is makes sense. Okay. So when you've got a 5% debt interest on the bond, fundamentally, America will only get 85 to 90% of the value of that debt back because they'll have to pay the rest in interest. Now, China has been steadily lowering its debt towards and for China. And China has been selling their debt away so that they are able to purchase tangible goods, probably gold, silver, oil, whatever. But they're not holding the debt bonds anymore. And the Federal Reserve is having to print extra money to cover this. And so this is called a debasement. And we're fundamentally, the debt has to be paid for somehow. And as they don't have the money, they have to print the money, they have to create the money, which devalues the American dollar. Now, what we've also seen in recent times with a war in a region of Europe between you and R is that debt bonds were seized by the European Union and America. Um, I know there's a figure of 300 billion, and I think that's what Europe may have seized, but it could also be a similar amount, if not more, from America. And what they've done is they've used the debt bonds held by country R to fund the weapons production for country U. And so they have weaponized the American dollar and the debt that they've sold. And what we're now seeing is countries around the world are no longer particularly interested in purchasing debt, and they see it as a high risk. And this also links in with Japan and the carry trade, where the Japanese yen, which had a 0% interest, could be purchased or borrowed. You could you could buy money with an interest or a debt with an interest, and then sell it back. Sell it, take the profit, and then clear your 0% interest loan with Japan. And that's also coming under pressure because Japan's monetary system is failing and they're having to print money and debase their money as well. So we're seeing some very, very interesting times. Now, the cause of a lot of the stress currently with the G7 countries is the BRICS, and the BRICS is really, really important. Now, BRICS trade between the BRICS nations has just gone over the 1 trillion mark. I think that happened this week. And that's hugely significant because what that means is there's $1 trillion worth of trade that happened without using dollars and without the need to use dollars or euros or pounds. And these were countries that were trading between themselves in local currencies that's backed by 40% gold. And this is something that the G7 countries can't do and aren't doing. But what also happened recently, which is very, very significant, that every country in the world, bar the G7 countries, is allowed to trade with a BRICS nation using the BRICS transactional system for free away from the dollar. So that means that a small African country doesn't have to buy dollars to then buy something, say, from China. That small country can agree to purchase what it wanted via the BRICS system, and no dollar and no third party is ever involved, and it's a direct transaction. And what that also means is that the amount of gold backed on that system, it means that there can be no default. And something else that's actually happened with the BRICS nations, particularly China at the moment, is that the Shanghai gold reserve, gold bullion holders, something like that, from memory, they are now opening up branches in countries, and one of them is in Saudi Arabia, and they are transporting gold to their bank in Saudi Arabia. So when China buys oil from Saudi Arabia in yuan, Saudi Arabia can go straight to that bank in Saudi Arabia and exchange that for gold. So in actual fact, the yuan is good as gold now, and the dollar really isn't. Okay, so hopefully that kind of makes sense to where we are now, where we have a twin system running, and the BRICS nations are now becoming more powerful than the dollar and SWIFT system that we've seen for decades and decades.
Okay. I'm gonna jump in here and is that
Yeah,
cool,
yeah,
Gary?
yeah, yeah.
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give us a kind of language translator before I go into the astrology of it. So I'm gonna share a chart, and I wish I developed it a little more because there's certain ideas I'm having now. But this will just give you guys a general sense of things. So we're gonna look at the nine lights, planetary lights, because they're not planets really. They are energetic frequencies that influence us
Yes.
through the neutrino system. And they impact our auric field, and we feel it all the time. We go through it all the time. And the moon leads this movement because it moves the fastest. And so here's the symbolism for these frequencies that are going to be moving into an exact, perfected magic triangle on July 18th or around that time. And a week before July 7th is when Uranus goes into Gemini in order to initiate this minor grand trine to the Aries vanishing point, or the Aries vortex, as Ray Merriman calls it. I prefer vanishing point. In general, the symbolism in mundane astrology, that means the geopolitical, that means the world conception of what these planetary lights are doing, is as follows. The sun is symbolic of our leaders, our heroes, our fathers. Right now, on the stage of the world, we have, the kind of grand inquisitor presence is taken on by Donald Trump because he's the leader of um, the most powerful country in the world, uh, for sure militarily, and or seeming so. And so he's symbolic of one of our great leaders. And we see these movements occurring right now, and the planets also speak to this too, of this kind of harbinger, this shadow of a third world war. And so there are other leaders on the stage as well, not just Trump. There's obvious leaders, Putin, Zelensky. Remind me the leader of Iran. He's very significant too right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, I can't think of his name, but yeah, yeah, and then obviously we got the Chinese leaders Z, haven't we, or Xi or whatever his name is.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then Israel, the Israel leader as well.
Netanyahu.
And
Yeah,
Netanyahu. And so we have all these symbolic leaders, and that's going to be personified by the sun. In July, for next month, the sun's going to be in Cancer. And Jupiter, well, it's already starting as of today. We're presenting this reading to you guys on solstice. This is summer solstice. Very important, very impactful date. And so we're beginning of watching the sun go into the sign of Cancer, where Jupiter has gone in about a week and a half ago. And Jupiter is known as the great benefic, but Jupiter also brings in extremes. And it can also bring in a sort of me kind of messianic control. It's not just these planets operate how they operate. There's no really, they don't, these energies are careless of, what that means for the individual. These are forces that we align with in our own way in our own life. And we'll speak about that because the magic triangle I'm talking about through the aspects is not just the mundane world, it's yours, it's mine, it's Gary's. We're all going to feel this energy sink in our bodies, in our fields, and we're all going to prepare and experiencing it in our own way. And so the moon is symbolic. The moon moves really fast. So the moon is kind of like the arrow on the chart or the pointer or the cursor. It's where we look to see where the energy action is happening at any given moment, where it's highlighting. And Mercury, as we see, that's our intellectuals, our fools, our merchants, our youth. So a lot of the protests are occurring through the mercurial energy. And Venus is symbolic of the cultural elites, the artists, the currency, the move on some level, like the art that's on focus, even though Neptune would be in charge of the larger movie of what's occurring. Mars is our military, our warriors, our defense, our security. Mars for the United States is very strong. We know this. and for many countries right now, because that's what's being utilized, that's what's on the center stage right now is Mars. And Mars is squaring Uranus, and it will continue to square Uranus through the beginning of July. So war energy will continue. But at some point, as Mars moves through Virgo, as Uranus slowly moves through Gemini, that square between Gemini and Mars will start to wane before it revisits itself at a later time. Jupiter is our personal law, and we have to obey our personal law, otherwise we get punished, where Saturn is. On a mundane level, it's very similar, where all the countries are establishing their mundane laws and their financial laws. And all that's shifting and changing right now, and that's what we're perceiving. And that's what Gary was talking about when he was talking about the SWIFT system being overshadowed presently by the, what is it called, Gary? Is it the
Bricks,
Brexit?
bricks,
BRICS
bricks. Yeah.
system. And so Saturn is showcases the new law, and that's working with Neptune. We'll get to Neptune. Uranus is symbolic. It's a higher for octave of Mercury, so it's also symbolic of revolutionaries, innovators, inventors. And Uranus is going to be on, I don't want to say on center stage, because really all these planets are synced into center stage together. If there's any center stage, it's going to be the Aries vanishing point, which is a very paradoxical representation of planets with Neptune and Saturn. And I'll go into that at some point. Neptune rules our dreams, our visions, the religious leaders, the pacifists, the healers, the rescuers. And interestingly enough, in mundane astrology, it also symbolizes the navy and sea power. So as we watch these like financial shifts and changes occur, we're also going to be looking at how there's even illusions around that having to do with false flags and in the sea, what's happening, because the sea is what exists between these countries. It's a very
Yes.
mystical kind of, you know what I mean? Like this whole process of what's occurring because of that alone. And then the Aries vanishing point, this is what we're experiencing on the world degree. The Venus star point is here too, which is very loving and very powerful, but it's Pallas Athena. It's the war Venus, and it's an 8-year cycle. And so the expression of this Venus is standing firm and strong and having boundaries. And so it's love with boundaries. Because love is actually weak without boundaries, without Saturn, without solidification. And it's with Neptune and Saturn. So we don't know what's real, we don't know what's not real. We only can feel what's real and what is not real. That's why for humans, vision is not that important. I mean, we can only see so much of the spectrum on purpose because we're not here to see. We're here to feel and know. And though astrology gives us eyes to see the patterns and to see the sky clock and what time it is, really it's about coming back from the mind into the body and feeling presences or lack of presences. And that can attest to the truth of what's occurring or not. And then the ultimate theme for tonight, as we discuss, is the minor grand trine happening in July, the magic triangle. And we will go over that. And so I'll stop this.
Could you
We'll
just
have,
cover Pluto, please? I think you missed Pluto.
I did. You're right. Thanks. So Pluto. Pluto's that planet that they tried to hide a couple years ago and pretend it was never really a planet, right? On
Yeah.
purpose, so that astrologers and people wouldn't look at, what the real theme is, what the larger reform theme is. So Pluto symbolizes the reformers, the transformers, and the destroyers. And what that means is that, you know, even though Saturn is the one that gives its reality checks as far as like where the market is, what's real in the market, which money, which ways of currency can really stay afloat. Pluto actually represents, especially now in Aquarius, a deep transformation of 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 the financial system and a deep shift of wealth, where wealth lies. Because if we're, as me and Gary were discussing, with the dollar being devalued, and many of us have been discussing, is there going to be a new dollar to be the new repository for wealth and value? And then what about crypto? Crypto is another example. It seems like the US is also banking on, they don't own enough gold, so they're banking on their Bitcoin, you know. And Bitcoin is ruled by Saturn, as XRP is ruled by Mercury. So it's interesting to see, is crypto like is it a momentary? Is it like a temporal means by which to transfer wealth? It seems like it's being utilized for something like that. Or is it being something more permanent, especially with the recent stable coins being put into law, being Saturnized? We'll see. We'll discuss some of this. And so Pluto is is synced in with this magic triangle. And so everything is synced in. What's going to be destroyed is what's going to be destroyed.
Yeah.
What's going to be dissolved by Neptune is going to be dissolved. What Saturn makes real and solidifies, and all these outer planets are going to do it together. And they're all in signs, they're all in the elements of air and fire, which means it's happening so quick, we're all playing catch up to what these energies mean as it occurs. We're all like trying to understand, okay, what does this mean? Does this mean this or that? And so it's air and fire, so it's happening quick, you know. And if I haven't mentioned, gold is ruled by the sun. Silver is ruled by the moon. Copper is ruled by Venus. Mars rules iron. Mercury rules mercury. Jupiter rules tin. Saturn rules lead. You, you guys get the picture here. Uranus, uranium, Neptune. Neptune, I don't know. But there's layers to being, what's shifting and changing on all levels of what these planetary frequencies symbolize. So I'll stop there. I'm going out too far.
No,
Gary, you
that's
want to add
brilliant.
something, and then we'll get
Um,
into some.
yeah, no, I've had again a knowing, a feeling about July. Now, I'm not talking financially necessarily, but the energies I'm feeling in July at some stage of July are going to be very, very important, not only for the personal, but also potentially for the world. Um, my pendulum indicates that I'm right in my assumption, but it won't tell me why, which is, because again, we have to, um, you don't, spoiler alerts are not really what our higher selves are about. Our higher selves are about guiding us into the right kind of direction. So, as Maten quite rightly said, we can learn to feel and develop our inner strength, our inner power, and live this life not seeing it but feeling it and experiencing it in the body and the mind. um, Now it's very interesting when you're talking about Neptune and the water. There's a aircraft carrier, an American aircraft carrier that was due to be decommissioned, and that is now being sailed into the zone where there's issues currently, um, in the Gulf of Persia or the Persian Sea. And that is a very strange occurrence. And it has the potential to be a very big false flag, as Maten hinted to. Um, to sail a vessel that's due to be decommissioned into potentially I don't want to use the WAR zone message, but certainly a place where there are difficulties going on, would mean that it would be very likely that it could be sacrificed for a purpose that would not be positive for the human race in the long term. What are your thoughts on that, Matem?
I'll start with this. I'll segue to it. So in July, right, or I should say right now, we're like a week and a half from July. We're already there. And we're all feeling the foreshadowing, you know what I mean, of of just what's coming, what's happening in the field. And today is solstice. And so we're seeing the sun go into Cancer, where Jupiter is. It's hitting Jupiter about now. So Jupiter's going through the cazimi. It's being burnt into the heart of the sun. And so it's going to be being reborn soon. And Jupiter's death means that its spirit is going to be expressed. And spirit's going to go into Cancer. So what we're feeling right now is Jupiter's new birth into a sign of birth, of birthing, into the mother sign of Cancer. So it's a whole new world that we're even gonna envisage tomorrow. A birth is happening now, presently, with this cazimi. And as we push into Jupiter, Uranus has been in Taurus for the last 7, 8 years. So now it's going to go into Gemini on July 7th. And usually these energies happen prior to the day of, right in the foreshadowing, right when it's about to hit is usually when we feel the full impact of these energies. So with Uranus going into Gemini, it's going to overactivate our nervous system and our mind. And so grounding is going to be so much more important. It's like moving back into being a toddler again. We're rebirthing ourselves. Any type of new rebirthing method we can do for ourselves to ground so that we're feeling what we need to feel, experiencing what we need to experiencing, and making the correct moves and for our goals that we need to do. How this occurs on all levels is Uranus is going to hit Gemini for the mundane world as well. So tech is going to make that next shift into another level. We're going to make our next shift into mastering that level. Economically and financially, the financial system is going to adapt to a new system of the way it's using technology. And there's going to be rumbles and earthquakes initially as to what's happening as that slowly perfects into these new systems as we've been seeing. And so what we're going to see in July, or feel in July, I should say, and perhaps see in reflection, is these new systems coming into effect and some things occurring that are going to be very unsettling for us initially. And it's going to feel very uncomfortable. The world stage is going to continue to showcase war because war is symbolic of the smoke screen by which our energy is extinguished onto some external force, and instead of being here, it's the way they get us to leave our bodies and give them the leash so they can have their big show.
The externalization, isn't it? It's the
Yeah.
externalization of our power to focus on something that we shouldn't be focusing on.
Right. So I think that's why I'm speaking in such a language of the body in terms of the nervous system. It's going to be so important to ground, to be with yourself and feel what you need to feel and make time to meditate, to just sit with yourself, to not, sometimes I share insights on meditation with people and they want to know, well, how do I do it? What's going to happen? That's your mind trying to figure the shit out. There's nothing to fucking figure out when you meditate. You
Yeah,
just sit there and shut the fuck up
yeah.
and shut your mind up by breathing. Because when you're breathing, you can't think. When you're consciously moving with your breath, all you can do is feel the air as it passes out and into your mouth and nostrils. How can you think? You're here. You're here in your heart, feeling all the little attributes of your perceptions. And so July being in Cancer is a nice time to take care of your home, to focus on themes of the home, making sure you have enough food, making sure you have what you need, your clothes, your comforts, making sure you have all that stuff. because as we move into Leo, there's going to be bigger and bigger shows, Leo loves to showcase, so that energy is going to shift at the end of July. And, with things going retrograde, we're also going to make our own personal reset with the home and reflections and reorientations for ourselves. So I don't want to get too caught up in the external, although me and Gary are going to share more into that as I share the charts, and Gary shares a little more of what he feels may be coming due with the financial system. And then we'll shoot to October and
Yeah.
talk about October, November. So, Gary, share us a little, if you would, a little more with your insights for what could be happening, or what could be progressively occurring on the way to November, and then I'll start sharing the charts and see if we coincide.
Um, what I'm getting is, and I got a knowing today. I was kind of sitting there, kind of meditating, and by meditating, I'm sitting there not thinking about anything. I'm just being, if that makes sense. And if you can't just be, then you need to concentrate on your breath work, as Maten says. And what I tend to do is I lock my chest, my rib cage, and I breathe through my diaphragm, and that increases your chi energy, but also the concentration needed to do that initially will switch this off. It's a Charling technique of breathing, and once you get very good at it, you can actually move your power around and your energy around your body. And I can't do that, but I've seen it done. So for me, I sit there and I just become one with everything and just switch off. And I got this strong sensation that this coming month, July, there's going to be a change in the personal. And so I asked my pendulum if certain things could come online. Now, I don't know what things they are, but I just feel that we're going to get some things come online with us in the personal. And it's going to be a time of growth. But like everything that happens, it's not going to be like on this date, everything happens. What we do is we get a line and then we get a raise of the energy and then it stops and then it carries on again. But what we fail to perceive often is the energy level was there, and after we get this bump, our energy level is going to be at this level. So we're upgrading constantly, and I'm getting a very strong feeling that this upgrading from here to here, we're going to get a large dose of that. Now, on the externalization side of what's happening in the world, certainly the psychotic parasitic controllers are going to be wanting to try and maintain their power base and likely doing something a bit crazy. We could see false flags. We could see um, wobbles in the financial system, strange occurrences, but I'm not certain. Now, we we could that happens in July could then start to affect the August, September, October. So it could be a bit like a snowball going down a mountain till we get to a crescendo. And as Maten quite rightly pointed out, often financial matters come to the crux in Octobers and Novembers. Generally, the big crashes do. Now, I'm not saying we're going to have a big crash, but I also don't think that we're going to be fully aware of what's going on while we're living through it until we have the ability to look back in 2026 and observe what's happened and reconcile what's happened. Because I think Maten hit a really important thing there, that we may not be able to really observe, to step back and observe everything that's going on fully while we're in amongst it. But the The ability to then look back and reconcile what's happened will give us a different perspective, and we will be at a different stage moving on to the 2027, which I know is very, very important, but I still don't quite know why. So, Maten, what do you make of that?
That's great, Gary. In the sense that nothing is going to be clear, and searching for clarity is just going to bring us to walls because where we all need to be is here, you know. And I love that you brought up your Shaolin method because these practices of coordinating the breath is what's going to keep our nervous system safe because it's not about physical and safety or like the this big movie of the wars occurring regardless of how real or unreal that may or may not be. You have to be safe in your own body. That's number one. And how do you be safe in your own body? You have to regulate your nervous system. How do you regulate your nervous system? Through breath, through your own. And we're not trying to sell you guys on any breathing practices. You know your own. We know our own, you know. It's just you have your own methods, you know, you have your own way, your own guidance to find what works for you. But whatever is occurring out there is occurring in here. So control what you can control and turn off what's out there because we can't control the show, the movie. We can only control what's going on in here. And so the key to be in sync with the energetic and frequency shifts that the planets are going to make around July 18th, and I'll put up the chart in a minute with the magic triangle, that's going to be occurring within you. And you're not going to be able to sink into that if you're not able to reach your own state of calm and cool with what's happening in here. Because, you know, this realm is a test, you know. This realm seems like horrific and disastrous at times, but, you know, it's just a test. If you can't handle it, how can you handle the next, you know, if there's another, you know? It's about being able to handle that and understand that we live in a world of polarities. We live in a realm of polarities. And as I spoke in my video recently, I did a video on Human Design Transit Gate 15, where Jupiter is now. I talked about the David Hawkins scale, power versus force book, right? How you have lowest frequencies and highest frequencies. And for years in the New Age, people were talking about, oh, you know, I'm vibrating at 500 and that person's, angry all the time, so they're vibrating at 150, you know what I mean? Or true masters vibrate at 1,000, you know, and that's all nice. That's a nice little vertical hierarchy, but that's not really what it's about.
Hmm.
The true hierarchy or the true kind of measure is a horizontal line. And in the middle, you have balance. And on one extreme, you have selfishness. You have concern with the self. You have power plays. And on the other side of that horizontal line, you have selflessness, caring for others, doing things for others, which is the same as doing things for yourself. Who would have thought? And it's us, playing with the pendulum of that line, that horizontal line, and each of us in our own journey arriving as best we can at that center point and being with capital B balance and end this chase to be at a higher, oh, I'm at a higher frequency. No, that's not what it is.
It's going to come naturally, isn't it? It's
What's
going to
that?
be it's going to come naturally. It's going to be a natural thing that flows, and it's been in that flow. I mean, it's like I was talking to Sonia, and she's talking about the Infinity Eight and being in the center of the Infinity Eight, which is just what Maten said. And my favorite saying currently is observe, do not absorb. So observe what's going on, but don't absorb that energy into you. You don't need to, because the show is not for you. It's other things that are playing out. It's about you looking after you in the best way you can. Sorry, Matan, carry on.
And looking after you is you looking after others. Because how can you be a stabilizing force otherwise?
Yeah.
You being a center point of balance, as Gary just pointed out, like that's for everyone. That's as and for everyone as an example, as something to tap into, as something to connect with. When you resonate at such a balanced level and someone's lost an imbalance and if they can see you, if they can perceive your spectrum frequency, then they can connect and come closer to the center point. And so Gary's example was great. Just in line with what I'm talking about. And I'm going to show you guys now the center point. Are you guys ready? It's on this little map I have. Let's
I'm
look at
looking
it.
forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. So I have done my pendulum, guys, on this, and the 18th of July. It's the 18th, isn't it? You're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. My pendulum was extremely positive about something happening for the positive, fundamentally, of the collective. Okay. So initially, it may not seem positive, but it is. So remember that.
Okay, here you go, you guys. Give me a second. And I'll share this. All right, so all the other planetary bodies are, well, they're not removed. They're all here. Okay. Can you see this pretty clearly, Gary?
Yes. Yeah, I can.
So you guys can see right there, looks more like a pentagon. What's that? One, two, three, four sides. So not a pentagon, but four sides. So you can see here, Pluto's right here in Aquarius at 4 degrees. And opposing Pluto is where we have the sun in Leo. Sun in Leo? No, sorry, Jupiter. No, hold on. Let's not look at that yet. Okay. If we look over here, we see Pluto is in Aquarius 4 degrees. Okay. And then we have Uranus over here at 4 degrees Gemini. Now these are air signs, so that's a trine between these two planets. And the midpoint of those two planets is right here where Neptune is. And this is in Aries, 4 degrees. And this is right here around the Aries vortex where the Venus star point would be as well. And so what we have is this minor grand trine between planets in air and fire, because Neptune is in fire along with Saturn. And this kind of sync that's going to occur in mid-July is between the reforming forces of Pluto, destroying what is no longer necessary, um, Uranus, which is bringing new kind of, it's ruled by Gemini, so it's the mind resetting to a higher octave frequency of how it operates with technology. So new technological innovations. And that's going to reset together to the Aries vanishing point of Neptune and Saturn. Saturn making things real and also making reality checks on what is pretending to be real, but it's not really real. And I guess one example of that could be like if we look at 2008, right, the subprime mortgage crisis with the housing bubble, right? All these houses were worth supposedly all kinds of money. But then Saturn came in and said, no, they're not really worth that much, right? It was Saturn opposing Uranus. And, what occurred? The houses got reevaluated and the house prices came down. And so right now we have, as we've had for a while now, all these different cryptocurrencies, being at these set prices and these going way high and way low, according to what? Not according to anything like real,
Yeah.
right? Just speculation.
Yeah.
So are we going to have a similar crisis with crypto where all these overvalued cryptocurrencies are going to collapse 80% overnight as usual? As usually happens every 3, 4 years? Sure. We are in this, as Ray Merriman says, we are in the 16th year of a major 18th year financial cycle. So are we going to see an extreme like blow up in the market, stock market and crypto? Are we going to see higher highs coming? Yes, of course, we will. But that also means, you know, the crash is right around those times as well. You know, once it reaches new heights, crashes are right around the corner. And with Uranus going into Gemini, it seems that, and and crypto being rolled by tech and our markets and our new financial system being kind of pulled into new kind of tech developments and ways of being, we're going to see extremes, chaotic extremes of high and lows, probably out into the end of the year, you know? And but this cycle is still seeming to move up. Now it's complicated because as Gary was going through, there's all kinds of things. There's like the BRICS system, the SWIFT system, and then we have crypto, and then we have the other markets, and then we have gold and silver. So we have all these different valuations being negotiated by Saturn and Pluto. Saturn's going to be like, well, this is the real value of gold, and this is the real value of silver, and this is the real value of XRP or Bitcoin. You know what I mean? Like this is the fluff, the bubbles are all going to pop.
Yeah,
And this we're going to see what the real values are. And this is why, as me and Gary have been saying, this is why nothing is going to be really clear for a while. It's going to go up and down. It's going to be very chaotic, and things might not even solidify as to the true value until next spring,
yeah,
you know? And but we're going to see this process. That's what we're going to see. And that's why you need to keep cool and keep in the center because you can't be emotional about these things. You can't be like owning all your gold and crypto and just praying, that it hits a certain number, and panicking if it doesn't, you know. What is that? That's just gambling,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
just the highs and lows, right? And
yeah,
extremes. So it's important to keep in the center. But so what this is establishing, why I bring up this magic triangle is because values are going to be established. We're going to get reality checks. Pluto is going to reform what doesn't work. It's going to destroy what's not authentic. And only what's authentic in the monetary system will survive. And Gary's been saying this on his channel.
yeah,
He's been talking about this. What is fucking just a hoax, this fluffed up markets and debt bonds, all that's going to come, to real, to what it really is.
yeah,
And so Gary's already been talking about this for months now, about about this authentication of what is of true value for humans. And I want to add one more theme before I go to you, Gary. There's another theme that's really important. And in this chart, it's symbolized, I would say, by the sun, because the sun is the focal point of awareness. It is the focal point of where the energy is and the guidance of it and where the will is. The sun is about will. And so what I'm talking about here is self-determinism. And we have this larger theme that's impacting all of us, I like to call it Skynet. It's the best analogies from that, the Terminator films, right? And it's this creeping shadow threat that the world's going to be ran by artificial intelligence or by artificial stupidity, whatever you want to call it. But what that means is that are we giving up our sovereignty? Are we giving up our self-determinism? Is it going to make decisions for us? Is that correct? Saturn ensures that what's occurring happens slowly with checks and balances, which means we as humans need to remember to speak up and to express when necessary that we need oversight on these technologies. We can't just allow these technologies to take over and determine our future and determine our present. And so the most important theme for the next couple of years is to make sure that humanity doesn't merge with technology or it doesn't get absorbed into it, as Gary's been talking about, and lose its own self-determinism. What we're looking at is retaining human mastery. It's our world. We have the heart. There's no heart in robotics. There's no heart in AI. Heart is the life
Yeah.
of us. It is the vortex. We live in the alcove of feeling. We're feeling-based beings in the sense of, I just use that word kind of generally, just in the sense of our bodies our authority, not our mind. If our mind was our authority, that's what AI is. It's a super exaggerated, monster mental mechanism. You know what I mean? That's attempting to be lorded over us. But
Yeah.
because why? Because it's mentally more intelligent than us. So what? Our heart is more intelligent than that. Our gut is more intelligent than that. And I think that's the problematic perspective, frame, and viewpoint that the overall Western world is attempting to foil over our eyes, that it has a larger mind than us. That's not what it's about. We have the heart. It has no heart.
It's our connection to source, and it doesn't have that. It doesn't have that divine spark of ingenuity, and we do. And again, gold and silver are the only real money in this world. Always have been, always will be. So when we're talking about cryptos, bonds, all sorts of stuff, the stock market, the bubble, we've got a bubble on top of a bubble on top of a bubble on top of a bubble. And at some point, reality is going to have to strike and everything is going to have to be pegged back down to gold and silver again. There is no doubt about that in my mind. Now, all the cryptos are a derivative of. Even house prices, the dollar, the pound, the euro, whatever currency you're using, is a derivative fundamentally of gold and silver. And what we're seeing is certainly manipulated markets. I mean, the markets are manipulated, but we're seeing the gold going up in value, but actually we're not. This is a very interesting concept, but gold has not changed in value since Roman times. So what do I mean by that? In Roman times, if you had an ounce coin of gold, you could go into a tailor's and get the swishest toga and sweetest set of sandals you could imagine for your gold coin. And you could go to any of the top places in Rome and you'd look $1 million. Okay? With that 1 ounce of gold today in America, you could go into a tailor's and get a really nice suit and a really nice pair of shoes. That gold coin has not gone up in value, but what has changed of the perception of its value is the debasement or the watering down of the money to buy the gold. So in the 1920s, you could buy a gold coin for $20 and you could go to any bank with $20 and they would give you a gold coin for it. Today, what is it, $3,300 ish? I haven't looked for a while, but we'll do the $3,300. Okay, so could be 3,200. $3,200 for the one gold coin. You can't go to any bank in this country, my country, the UK, anywhere, and say, "Here's $3,200. I want my ounce of gold for it," because it's not backed. The money's not backed by it. It's not backed by gold anymore. And so what's happened is they're printed and printed and created money out of nothing. And so that $20 that could once buy you an ounce of gold has devalued to the stage now where it's 3,300 or $3,200 just to buy the same ounce of gold. But the same ounce of gold has not changed in value because you can still only buy what you could buy in Roman times as you can today. And I hope that analogy makes sense. So when gold goes to $4,000 or $5,000 or $10,000, what that actually means is the purchasing power of the dollar is pennies or cents in the pound or in the dollar. Cents. It's lost 98, 99% of its true value because of the inflationary use of the dollar to fund wars and the debasement of the system. Now, this is very interesting. In the UK, the Bank of England works on a 2% inflation rate. Now, if we only ever got 2% inflation on the money over our working lifetime, we would lose 50% of our purchasing power from beginning work to the end of work. So just by that 2% inflationary target, we lose over our lifetime over half the purchasing power of that money. And that does not include banks creating money. And that figure was worked out by, I think Andy Sheckman did that. I watched one of his shows a few weeks back, and Andy Sheckman said that, and he'd done the math, and I quite believe it. And so this has been a stealth tax by the money men, that small group, that 1%, to enslave us. In the 50s and 60s, one man could go out on his wage, family could stay at home, he have a house and a car, and feed his kids and his missus with no problems whatsoever. Today, both parents have to work, their children are pushed from pillar to post, and nobody can afford to buy houses anymore, let alone cars or anything else. And everything's on the knock, everything's on HP, everything's on borrowed. And that's not because people are lazy. This has been a deliberate stealth tax on the money by the bankers, because every year those bankers take 2 cents out of every dollar you earn. Every year of your life, 2 cents has been taken out of your dollar, and that doesn't include all the money printing that's gone on the background on top, money creation. So now on that chart, can I just ask you that there's four degree settings on that chart? Is that relatively rare to see four degrees in that way? I know it's probably a really bad question, and I've probably just dropped you in the shit. But because because what struck me was with numerology, because some people are into numerology, right?
The four is money, right?
Right, but we've got four money wise four times, which equals 16, and 1 and 6 equals 7, and 7 is always the pre-cue to 8, which is the beginning of something else new again.
Yeah, nice one.
And
I mean,
that's
it's
what struck me when I was looking at it. I was thinking, oh my God, we've got four fours. If you add it all up with the numerology, it makes 7. And 7 is the last number before we get to 8. And 8 is actually 1 because it's the infinity symbol and we go back to the beginning again.
it's all super rare, man. I mean, the Venus start point at the Aries ingress with Neptune and Saturn, like this is like all of the planets being connected with this minor grand trine. It's a standing marker of history that we're in this moment. And this moment more than any other astrologically, which again won't perfect till next spring, but just the process of all the planets being in air and fire and coordinating a geometry together is such a change and transformation beyond. And I know us astrologers say this every month, like, you know what I mean? Here's the new,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
transformation. No, I mean, this is it.
Yeah,
This is Aries' vanishing point, and this minor grand trine, this magic triangle. I mean, this is like the mark of the ages. Like what's occurring here, what's occurring now is these are moments that we're going to reflect back on and say, oh, this is when I began my new, began. All of us are beginning some new project, something
Yes.
new.
Yeah.
It's what it is. It's
Yeah.
this Aries is where we're all having our vortex beginning into something new.
It feels
And we're
like the
all,
cusp of, doesn't it? Because if you take the numerology of the seven, seven is the cusp of something changing. And that is kind of like the portal, astrology wise, of that. This is it. And you're going through this portal. And the next thing is August. And August is number eight of the months.
wow.
Can you
I didn't
see?
even think about that. Yeah,
So it's like my brain is like, and I'm getting flesh of the goose here.
yeah. It's a
Goose.
pleasure.
But that's really quite mad because I'm sure I heard from somebody, could have been Astrologer Joe, I don't know. And I'm sure they said that the last time the planets have been in a similar way was World War Two.
The last time Uranus went into Gemini is World War II.
There we go. Thank you for
The la-
clarifying that. Yeah.
last time that Neptune and Saturn were together is like I guess it happens every time. Usually it has to do with Russia. There's a thematic with that. But as far as everything together that's going on, Pluto and Aquarius, that's like it's like 200 years ago was the last time it occurred. And really
Wow.
it's like thousands of years that such an occurrence of all these planets together are creating this. But I love that hit that you caught up because I kind of caught that too. I was like, huh, everything's in 4 degrees. That's
Yeah.
weird.
It just
Four
struck me.
Four in numerology is a new structure, right? It's like it does have to do with money. It's like a not a new structure like eight. Eight is a new beginning of a new cycle, but four is like the structure of something, like a new solidified structure. So yeah, that's a trip. Yeah, it's all going to be in 4 degrees. So even though Uranus will go into Gemini like it did in 1941 at the advent of World War II, it's going to go in there, but then it's going to hit 4 degrees. And that's when it hits Pluto, hits Jupiter, the sun, you know what I mean? Neptune, Saturn's going to be a little ahead, but Saturn will come in. It'll regress. It'll retrograde back onto that fourth degree and do its check and balances and check what's real and what's not for all of us, you
Because when
know.
you say checking what's real and what's not, you also said in the beginning of this that the sun is the representation of gold.
And and the sun is has its exaltation in Leo, and that's July, what, 21st, 22nd, right?
Something like
Leo is
that.
July
Yeah.
21st, 22nd to August 23rd, 24th.
22nd. I think 23rd is when it finishes. I'm 22nd of
Hey, you
August.
would know, you would
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
But that's gold. That's the value, and the shining, the stage gets gold on the stage of the world.
yeah. But
Wow.
also the eight or the lion, which would be Leo in tarot, is strength. And I know it's not a tarot deck, we haven't pulled it, but Leo the lion is strength in the tarot. So
Yeah.
again, I'm my brain's just putting stuff together, and I'm just thinking out loud, and am I right? Am I wrong? Who knows? But it's bloody interesting, isn't it?
We're generators. We enjoy our synchronicities. It seems like a lot of nice synchronicities with as we move into August. But now let's take a detour. Let's look a little further. Let's go ahead. I'm going to pull up the chart for the November, no, the October new moon,
Yeah.
right before November. That's the hit I was getting. I was getting later October, November. Let's see the energy shift. It's going to be a new moon in Libra. And so the ruler of that new moon is Venus, and Venus does rule currency.
Hmm.
So we're going to take a look at this and get some input and
Now,
some.
interesting, guys. Before Maten starts talking about this fully, I did my pendulum before we started in front of my 10, and I asked the question about the financial crash and what's going on here, and if the date that my 10 is talking about is super significant, and my pendulum refused to answer. But it gave me that it will not answer. So it wasn't that it just sat still. It actually gave us the will not answer. And I asked my pendulum if we were right about this being significant financially, would my pendulum tell us? And it said no very clearly. So that I just want to give the audience that background on my pendulum won't tell me what's going on this date, but it is significant because my pendulum won't tell me what's going on this date. So it's all yours now, number 10.
All right. So just, I mean, I haven't even looked at this chart. I just got the hit last night. I'll look at the new moon for October. So I'm just kind of flying by the seat of my pants with this chart. But lo and behold, there's a grand water trine. We have Jupiter in 24 degrees Cancer. We have Mercury and Mars in 20 and 21 degrees Scorpio. And we have Saturn retrograded back into Pisces, where the North Node is in 17 degrees Pisces. And Saturn is back into Pisces again. Yeah, 26 degrees. It's not exact. Will it go exact? Maybe at a later date, but it's in force. That's a grand water trine.
So what
And
does
what
that mean? What does grand water trine mean to the layman like myself?
so in contrast to next month, where we're having a grand minor trine between the elements of fire and air, this is a grand water trine. So what that means is that we're looking at the energy of the element of water. So it's the inner worlds, it's the emotional worlds, it's the worlds of feeling and intuition. And because it's in trine with the North Node in Pisces, it's even a stronger emphasis towards where we have already been, which is to surrendering the mind and trusting intuition and not attempting to penetrate the veil of the mist of the amorphous clouds of confusion that are lingering, but to allow those mists to allow that to respect that veil and not to penetrate it with the mind, but to guide ourselves in the dark through our intuition, through our emotional awareness, through our sense of feeling. This is a true surrendering of the mind, this grand trine, and trust that that wading through this kind of amorphous ocean of beingness, this realm that we're all in, trusting our own guidance through it with our eyes closed in the dark, and that we're being led in the correct directions, and that we're safe, that we can handle it, that this realm is not an issue. We're ready for the next one. We're done here. We're moving on. We're not going to get lost and stuck in the horror movie that's going to be playing on the wide screen because, they're always playing a horror movie, whether you see it as if you see it as a comedy, you see it as a comedy. That's even more strength to your perceptual apparatus. Comedy, humor, that's what heals the nervous system. And that, in a sense, is also the solvent for Uranus and Gemini. We're going to get amped up. The mind's going to be amped up even more. How do you calm that? Well, just watch a comedy, laugh, joke. Look, look at what juxtapositions you can find and find the humor in that. So it looks like the final kind of, and it's not even the final, again, not till spring of 2026, not till moving into 2027, but it's moving towards the end of a cycle where we've passed the test in a way. We've surrendered our minds. We're able to move into our hearts. We're not being stuck in the mind. And, the only way we can assess new worlds and new worlds of awareness is through not being in our mind, through being in the heart, through being in the feeling awareness. And this looks like the opportunity to do that. So it means with water that everything, a grand trine is when there's three planetary geometries all connecting in such a way where grand things can occur through this element of water, through the element of intuition. So things might set into place in a certain way. Again, on the TV screen, could it look like some kind of financial stuff, collapse or things like that? Perhaps. We don't know if we'll have collapse. We don't know that they want that. It seems like they just want to carry forth the stagflation and that they already have ways to kind of resolve anything from going into too extreme a collapse. You know what I mean? It seems like they might opt for that route. And so, could extreme things happen? Sure. I mean, there's talk of there's talk of certain things, but with this, I see the positive in this, or at least the kind of high frequency kind of balance is with our intuition and not so much over focusing on the movie at play, but rather this powerful energy we're all going to have access to.
So just looking at the numbers there, we've got 20 degrees, haven't we? 24 degrees. Is that 20 degrees again for that triangle?
26 on the bottom with Saturn, 26,
26.
17. So this one has a lot of numbers.
But that would be 16 again, wouldn't it?
Are you adding up? What are you adding?
20 plus 24 plus 26, 2 plus 2 plus 4 plus 2 plus 6.
Yeah,
No,
I'll let you do the math. I can't correct your math here.
no,
That's
no,
your
no. I'm just trying to just off my head. So it's 20, isn't it? Which is 2. 24, which is 8. 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it's 8. 2 plus 2 plus 4 is 8. We then go to 26. 8, 2, 10, 16. 1 and 6 is 7
So we have again a numerological repeat of
of
this new
7.
beginning.
Yeah,
And then it's even present. Look at Uranus is back to 0 degrees Gemini. Neptune is back to 0 degrees Aries. Pluto is almost back to 0 degrees Pluto or Aquarius. And what is Uranus in 0 degrees? What is Neptune at 0 degrees? What is Pluto? It means the advent of something new. Something is absent. Something is not quite yet born yet. So it's another rebirthing. And
wow.
when planets are in 0 degrees, they're not here nor there. They're like it's the moment before a rebirth, a moment before a presence, a new presence. And with Uranus at 0 Gemini and Neptune at 0 Aries, again, another kind of reset of this energy resetting itself and a new plateau and a new expression of it. So will the financial system be clear at this time? Perhaps. Perhaps
Because
some things are happening that'll make it clear.
this is in October, isn't it?
This is October 20.
Yeah. S- So this is the 10th month. And if we add 1 and 7 together makes 8, which would be a new beginning.
Okay, nice.
If you wanted to, I know you can make numbers make anything. I understand that. Audience, I can go, yeah, yeah, you can just make numbers out of anything. But it's very interesting that again, we've got 7 and 8 showing in two different charts that are linked somehow that we haven't quite figured out how, and we probably won't understand how until 2026.
And let me add that the evidence for these impacts of economic shifts and changes, um, in doing the research, I'll just go over it real quick. In the 1929 stock market crash, it was Saturn square Pluto. In the Black Monday of 1987, it was Saturn square Uranus. In the 2008 financial crisis, the house bubble pop was Saturn opposed Uranus. And in now 2025, we have Saturn trining Uranus in Gemini, or sextile, sorry, sextile Uranus in Gemini, and Saturn also sextiling Pluto in Aquarius. And we have Saturn conjunct Neptune. And anything else? Let's see. Yeah, those are the majors. So again, with the astrological evidence, the financial astrology evidence for all the crashes and all the huge shifts, it's always something to do with Saturn. Saturn in impact with the other outer planets, Uranus or Pluto or Neptune. And so although it's not a square or opposition, and that could mean that maybe a square opposition is definitely well, no, all these planets are in air and fire, so there's no squares or oppositions coming in the next year. So this is the aspects that we're going to see continue kind of play back and forth for a while as the synodic cycles of each planet, each outer planet play out. But that's what it is, man. That's all I
Yeah.
got.
No, that's also because also Saturn
That's
for
the
me,
okay.
Saturn for me also has connections to the Fibonacci.
Oh yeah, you spoke about that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Really
And
cool.
so, oh God, I'm getting goosebumps again. So the Saturn effect with the Fibonacci would clearly indicate that I bet there's something in this in which we're getting the collapse and the rebirth of something new via that Fibonacci sequence. Got to be involved in it somehow because Saturn is the black cube.
Well, yeah, because and it's touching Pluto and Pluto's death.
There we go.
Maybe the death of the Fibonacci sequence.
Or the death of the financial via the by it touching and the rebirth into something new. Because
Well, as you said in the past, the financial system that's antiquated that we're still utilizing is utilized by the Fibonacci sequence,
yes,
or it is that.
because it's that debasement of the money fundamentally means that the money is feeding upon itself to create itself out of nothing. And that's exactly how the Fibonacci sequence works.
Yeah, check out Larry's videos on that, you guys. He breaks it down pretty good. That's
The
very
Fibonacci has to feed upon itself to continue to grow.
yeah, it's the Ouroboros, right?
Yeah, which would make the bubble on top of the bubble on top of the bubble would just be a Fibonacci that was about to collapse, that was then given the energy to carry on to the next bubble where it's about to collapse. And then they have to inject money into it to take the next Fibonacci sequence of the bubble. But the creational part of or the extension of the Fibonacci is to print something or create something out of nothing. And so you only really have the base amount of something which is the creational, and that's gold and silver. If you want to look at it in those terms. And so gold and silver are the creational base level that everything is a derivative of, and everything feeds off that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. What does that mean with everything else, with a new dollar or crypto? It just means, as Gary's noting, everything is grounded by that prime factor of gold and silver being the source and everything else derivatives of it. And so yeah, it's
Because
cool when you look at do medical astrology because yeah, gold is ruled by the sun.
yeah, and the moon. And we know that crypto, particularly Bitcoin, is affected by moon cycles. It's been proven. It goes up and down new moons. and full moons, I can't remember which way, but if you overlay the moon
Right.
cycles
It
on
varies. Yeah,
crypto,
I've studied the cycles. It varies, but there's always an impact. There's always a crashing into a moon and a rising after, or a reverse. And sometimes even with the new and the full moon, it reverses. This year, economically, there's no, I mean, all these patterns are suffering the inverses and reverses and turnovers and upside down shifts because it's a year of chaos. Pluto's
yeah,
out of bounds amidst everything that's occurring, admits though it's not playing by any rules, even though it's in geometry with the other planets and the magic triangle, the minor grand trine, and the Aries vanishing point. Pluto is still operating out of bounds. And that alone is enough chaos for all of us financial astrologers and numerologists and just and Gary and all of us looking at this that it's more chaotic patterns than there is to really find some kind of, you know what I mean, something clear. We're all kind of groping in the dark this year,
yeah,
you
we are.
know?
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
doing our best, but
yeah.
I don't really see any true clarity of things until next spring,
No.
ultimately in 2027.
See, one of the options I see for America, and when I'm talking about America, I'm talking about the world, because fundamentally the entire world is linked to the dollar. So all of the currencies are pegged to the dollar. So what I mean by that is the exchange rate mechanism. So if Russia and China want to sell oil to each other, although they're doing it in local currencies, they're still using the dollar, as in how much a barrel of oil is worth, to peg how much they're going to sell the value to each other to. Does that make sense? So, in actual fact, even though the BRICS nations are trading between themselves, they are still using the dollar as the um, currency valuation of the oil, which they will then exchange between themselves. So if there's 10 yuan to the dollar and there's 5 rubles to the dollar, if Russia wants to buy 2 barrels of oil, they're going to have to give them 20 to purchase those barrels. You see what I mean? Because the dollar still pegs all currencies, even though they're not necessarily following and using the dollar for trade. Now, when the dollar collapses, that will affect the BRICS nations regardless, because there will be no pegging of what something's worth for the world. And so they may have to, and this is where we could see till 2026, where we're not going to understand what anything's worth, is if we, what was the date of that new moon again in October? The
I think it's the 21st.
21st. So if we get that crash fundamentally on the 21st, even though the BRICS nations and nations will be able to trade, the value of those goods will be unknown, which causes a major headache because there's no central currency or there's no central value. And at some point, I mean, they'll shut the COMEX down and everything, and nobody will know what gold's worth and nobody will know what silver's worth. And if you don't know what gold's worth and you don't know what silver's worth, you have no idea what the value of your labor or the goods of that are worth. And it puts chaos throughout the whole system. So there's that. So, what is possibly likely would be is that the entire world, once this collapse potentially comes with the dollar, would say to America, for stabilization purposes, that the dollar needs to be pegged to gold and it needs to be revalued to gold, or gold needs to be revalued up to the dollar. And so, what you could say is they may decide that an ounce of gold is suddenly worth $10,000. Well, they may decide $1 is worth $3,000, £3,000. 1 ounce, sorry, of gold is $3,000. Whatever level they set that at, then all other currencies could then work out the value of their goods internationally as they trade between each other. So either that has to happen, or someone like China has to step in and say, we have more gold than anybody else. This is how much gold we own. This is the value of the gold. The yuan is worth X amount. And so this is the exchange rate, and this is what your goods are worth now. And overnight, America could either keep its status or lose its status. And I suspect it will lose it because China has more gold than America.
I would revisit this with looking at the Chinese charts, the China astrology charts, compared to the US and the transit charts for both, because the astrology points differently. It's fascinating what you're saying, and it sounds like right on as a possibility. However, it's fascinating. The astrology doesn't point to that at all. America has just gone through its Pluto return, so it's going through a rebirth. And Jupiter going into Cancer is going into the sun sign of the United States. So this whole symbolism, this whole narrative we're hearing of a golden age is in the astrology as well,
Mm.
not just in the projections. So I'm suspecting the US may have something up their sleeve to counter that.
Yeah.
And we know that they're reaching for crypto and stable coins and other ideas in order to solidify, because what I think that perspective is kind of proposing is it doesn't matter what the reserve currency anymore is. I think that's what their intent is, to ground a new monetary currency, and is that it's not going to matter. That's what they're banking on, I think.
Mm.
Because when I look at the astrology charts, I don't see America taking such a blow, but I need to look at the Chinese charts too. You know what I mean? And then
Yeah,
again,
yeah,
this is
yeah,
just an
yeah,
astrology perspective.
yeah. I
Who
mean,
knows?
I'm just dropping logic bombs on it. I mean, one thing as well that I want to make the audience aware of is Tarot Tales UK, a lady called Caroline. She did a card scan the other day about would there be a um, digital currency that went across, central digital currency, a CBDC, you know, and she got no. And I've been getting no consistently as well. So it was very nice that she pulled the cards, and the cards were very, very clear. There will not be a central digital currency for the populace, for the masses. Countries have always been using a central digital currency in the form of Swift, or as in BRICS now, whichever form they're using, to transfer digits, credits from one place to another. But but apart from us using credit cards or debit cards, which is similar, we have always maintained a cash equivalent in parallel, and I don't see that changing fundamentally. So there's always going to be some form of cash where the CBDCs, where the New World Order control mechanism will not be able to throttle us down.
We're not going to allow that. I mean, I don't want that. You don't want that. No, we don't
No,
want these digital prisons.
no.
That's not correct.
But I get that it's not going to happen.
All right, man. Let's close it down. I can't stand being in front of a computer anymore. I got to go outside. Can only do it for so long before I'm like, oh God, I gotta get outside. I gotta get outside.
That was an amazing chat. Um, everyone, we've got nothing to worry about. What will be. Um, this is not financial advice, obviously, but if you have some spare credits in your account, purchase something tangible, something solid, like a little bit of gold or a little bit of silver. Um, there's some very, very good bullion firms out there. UK, Atkinson's is very reliable and well priced. And in Americas and Canada, you've got Andy Sheckman's what's he called again? His stuff. Uh, brain's gone, brain fart. Um,
I'm already gone, so
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
But
can't be
but
of any support.
but Miles Franklin, that's it. Miles Franklin is very reliable. Or your local pawnbrokers, whatever. But it it we have something called bail-ins these days, not bailouts. And fundamentally, if the banks crash, they can take your money as an unsecured creditor, and you got no leg to stand on. And at the point in which you say, "Oh, that's right, it's insured by whichever system you've got," if you've got multiple banks crashing, the dollar's worth nothing. When they eventually pay you out on dollars, if they have enough money to do that, you'll be getting pennies in the pound again, cents in the pound again for what you had as savings. So it's up to you guys. I know what I would do had I had some money. So with that, guys, thank you very much. Thank you, Miten. That's been an awesome chat.
That's
The
scary. That's great.
charts, the charts were
Awesome.
brilliant, and clearly, I think we've got two dates or two periods in time which are very, very significant that will that we may not realise the significance of until after the dates have happened.
All right, man. Thanks so much. See you guys. See everyone next time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget
Thank you
to
very
follow
much.
Alternative Interactions and me, Meten on Plutonic Planes. And as the dates get closer, Gary and I will revisit because, we want to see how close we were
Yeah,
in terms of just being of support to the community and, and where we are with the energy. We'll revisit this on the Magic Triangle. Sounds like a good time.
that sounds brilliant. That sounds brilliant.
All
Thank you
right,
very
man.
much, Meten. It's been brilliant. Thank you. Thank you,
Good.
everybody. Please like, share, and subscribe to Meten of Platonic Planes and to me, Alternative Interactions. You're all stars. Bless the lovely Femi. And with that, we'll say goodbye.
There's my hand.
There's your hand. Bye.